When Rachel Wexler launched her practice, people told her it would take 3 years to replace her income. She thought, no way. She had the skills, the experience, more than 20 years leading teams in the education world. She was going to figure this out faster than anyone. She didn't. And in this conversation, she's remarkably honest about what those first few years actually looked like. The promises that didn't materialize, the pitches that went nowhere, the inbox silences that felt personal, even when they weren't. But here's what she also discovered. All of those conversations she was having, all of those seeds she was planting, even the ones that didn't seem to go anywhere, they were actually working, just on a timeline she couldn't see yet. My name is AJ Riedel. This is Thriving Through, the podcast where each week I have real conversations with self-employed consultants about what it really takes to build a sustainable, profitable, and fulfilling consulting practice. Today's guest is Rachel Wexler, an executive coach and leadership consultant who spent more than 20 years in education and ed tech before launching Rachel Wexler Leadership. Rachel works with leaders and organizations on interpersonal dynamics, coaching, consulting, and advisory work. And she is thoughtful, candid, and genuinely generous in what she shares today. We talk about why building a consulting practice takes longer than you think, what it looks and feels like to evolve your practice model without losing focus, and how she manages the very real challenge of always being on as a solo practitioner. We also get into her vision for the next 3 to 5 years and the one book that has shaped how she thinks about growth. Let's get into it. Rachel, welcome to the Thriving Through podcast. I'm delighted to have you on the show with me today.
Thank you, AJ. It's such a pleasure to be here.
As you know, the podcast is named Thriving Through. So the first question I like to ask my guests is, what does thriving mean to you?
That is such a good question. I often, we do a lot of surviving. And I often tell the story about when I was in my mid-20s and my parents and I had this conversation and we were talking about celebration. And I think I I was young and I was optimistic and I thought my parents were making a very big deal of an event that didn't need so much pomp and circumstance. And they said to me, almost in unison, life is hard. And so we need to celebrate all those moments. And I was very judgmental in the moment and thought, it's not hard. And 20 some years later, I can say to you, yes, life is hard. And too often, people are surviving and they are not thriving. And I see thriving as that moment where you're not just getting by, but you are feeling really good about what you are doing. You believe in what you are doing. And that can be in one's personal life, in their professional life. Hopefully, it is the combination of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it is feeling as though really understands what they bring to this world, whatever that might be, and that they are giving and they are receiving very much as a cycle, and that leaves them feeling a sense of fulfillment and joy.
I love that definition. And thriving, I love the name of the podcast because my goal in life is that I want self-employed consultants to have fulfilling consulting practices. Profitable, yes, we need profit to build wealth. But sustainable, that's important too, but fulfilling is the most important thing.
And when I wish people a happy birthday or happy new year, I always use the word fulfilling because fulfilling isn't just that you are giving and not receiving. And it's not that you are also receiving, in the context that you just provided, it's not just about being profitable, right? It is being able to feel like you are giving something and something is, and you are receiving. And I think that is, that is thriving.
Love that. I want to go back to your talking the story you told about your parents and
Yeah.
celebration. One of the things that I do in my coaching calls is that we start out by talking about having everybody share a win. Now, it can be a small win or it can be a big win, but something that they even a teeny weeny win, something that's a win. And then we do something really stupid. They think it's stupid until we get used to it. I have them do jazz hands or do woo hoo hoo or just, throw your hands in the air like you just don't care for 10 seconds to
Okay.
celebrate the win. And there's actually a neurological reason to celebrate because when we do something like that, that triggers the dopamine, and our brain goes,
Mhm.
"Oh, I like that feeling. I want more of that." So then the brain goes out and tries to find other wins. So your 20-year-old, 20 plus year old self didn't know the importance of celebrating, but your parents were really onto something, about the importance of celebrating. And I take it down to the teeny weeny wins, not just the big stuff.
And that advice is it's so salient because in our respective um, independent consultancies, we're always focused on those big wins. And if that's the only thing we're celebrating, we are going we could go a long time without that big, huge win, right? And so it's funny, I am probably better at getting my clients to celebrate the smaller wins than I am myself. Because the minute I feel like I've been celebrating, then it's okay, let's on to the next, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it is true. Celebrating those wins, big and small, is really important, and it helps us. It fuels us for the next thing.
Yes, because what we're doing is hard.
Yeah.
Being a self-employed consultant, being the CEO of your own business, chief cook and bottle washer, and salesman and everything, that's hard stuff. We need to feed ourselves and not just food.
Yeah. Exactly. We try and make it so it's not just food.
Exactly. So back
So
to back to the interview questions. Tell me, what was your path to becoming a self-employed consultant?
it's funny. I was thinking that your next question was going to be, what was your last win? And I was going to have to come up with
Oh,
something really
shoot.
good on the fly.
Yes. I'll ask you that at the end.
Um, so my path to being a self-employed consultant was really came after more than 20 years in industry. I started my career as a consultant and then had been running product and strategy teams largely in the education and ed tech sector for the better part of 20 years. And I I really enjoyed what I was doing because I not only was intellectually challenged, but there was also a fulfilling aspect. And I liked the people that I worked with. And there was also this fulfilling aspect in that we were working really hard, and the learner or the learner's organization or the students or patients of the learner were benefiting from the educational programs that we were designing. And that was that helped to put the work we were doing in context. We weren't necessarily in life or death situations, but it was and continues to be important to me that the end recipient of whatever I'm doing has an opportunity to better themselves in their life. In the last work I was doing, which was in the workforce development sector, um, we were designing programs that had the potential and ideally likelihood to break generational poverty, to help someone who wasn't necessarily helped from the education system, the public education system previously. And that was really amazing at the end of the day. Even if we weren't directly connected to that learner, that our work was benefiting that learner. So I really did enjoy the work that I was doing, and I was always in a cross-functional space so that I was working with people of various functions, oftentimes in different industries, and I loved the content of the work that I was doing. And I also really enjoyed, and I walk into a room and I very much gather the context. Some people will look at a balance sheet and be able to size up what a given organization really looks like. Other people might read a set of documents. I've always been the person who walks into the room and I see how people are interacting with each other. And I can pretty quickly connect with individuals and really understand what is going on. And some people I worked with would really appreciate that part of me. And I had one person I worked with for years, and she used to tell people, if you don't know what's going on with your team and you're not so sure, send them to Rachel. She'll tell you what's going on and help you figure it out. So, and then there were other people I worked with who really sometimes thought, stop getting into all this detail. Let's focus on the work, and would sometimes be frustrated with me, to be perfectly honest. And when my youngest, I have three kids who are all teenagers now, but when my youngest was about 3 years old, I was working full time and I had been parenting at that point pretty intensely for, I guess it was about 8 years. And I felt like it was time to do something for myself. Um, Not to go out to dinner with friends or even go away for a weekend, because those were things I was already doing, but to really have an opportunity to learn. And I needed to figure out what was the topic that I wanted to learn about in the amount of time that I was able to really give to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and somebody recommended to me taking an executive coaching graduate certificate program. And I did some research and I felt like it met a number of things. And it really did, because for me, it brought together three things that really interested me. It was business and business context, it was people and internal motivation and learning or growth, and it was lifelong learning. Because that was what I was doing in my day job, was designing learning programs. And the one thing that I had learned about adult learning is that people learn best when they are engaged. And when we talk about adult learning, which is essentially what coaching is, people need to feel like it is relevant to them, because otherwise they will watch TV, they will scroll YouTube, they will scroll Instagram, they will do anything else. But if you can really demonstrate that there's value to that learning, then people will really engage. And so I I found coaching was such a mix of, it touched a mix of the things I was interested in, and that I actually pulled together in a way that was pretty compelling. And so that was actually 10 years before I set out on, maybe 8 years before I set out on that journey. And I share that because for people who are considering this journey, it's not an easy decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
We leave a salary and benefits and all of the things that come with that. We leave a place, whether it is figuratively or literally, or it's figuratively on Zoom or whatever, we leave a place that we are accountable to and we go to at 5+ days a week, right? Um, and we take that need for structure or that desire for structure, um, and we put it on ourselves. And so it took me a long time before I had the confidence and the courage to take that risk. And that was not because I didn't have the support of a loving partner who is an entrepreneur at heart. So he was very much supporting me to do this from day one. I had colleagues who also thought that this was where I should be. And yet I needed to believe enough in myself and believe that I had the wherewithal to brave these ups and downs. So truly, I talked about it for years. I had many different plans, and I would talk about it all winter with this idea that I would take a few months off in the summer. I had saved this little fund of money that I could support myself without an income for some bit of time. And I said that I would give myself a summer to enjoy myself before starting this venture. And every spring, I had friends who asked me if I was taking this time and what we were going to do that summer because I always came up with all these plans. And every May, I would say I would find a reason to stay in my job. And finally, it was during COVID that I had taken a step back from, I left my job. I took on a few other things that were also really, and I thought that I would continue working on these projects um, while also launching my practice. And I avoided everything that scared me and dove into the projects that I was running. And finally, I had a milestone birthday, and I decided I had to make this leap before that birthday, or else I would live with regret. So, in the end, I could never get over the hump on my own. And then I took arguably a meaningless milestone in terms of the content of the work, and I decided that that had to be the absolute barrier.
Thank goodness for milestone birthdays, right?
Right. I mean, now I really should celebrate every single one.
Yeah. So tell me a story or two about some of the challenges you faced in building your practice and how you've overcome them.
So I think part of it is one thing was that some of the best advice that I had been given, I thought I could circumvent. And one of the milestones that I had was to replace my income. And people said it's going to take you at least 3 years to do that. And I thought, no way, I can work harder. I will do whatever it takes. It's going to take me, you know, I naively at first said 6 months and then I said a year. And it, the advice was pretty true, right? It certainly wasn't going to happen in 6 months to a year. And I thought, gosh, I'm doing this work that some of the people who know me best had been really pushing me to do and really felt so confident that I was ripe for this consulting practice. And I believed that therefore I'm going to figure this out faster than anybody else. And the reality is it takes some time to really get one's footing. And that is everything from setting realistic milestones to pitching yourself and your business to listening to everything around you and then aggregating that learning and iterating. So it's a constant cycle of continuous improvement and really product market fit. Um, and when you are the product, you also have to learn how not to take things personally.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
it didn't matter how many times people would say, you are going to have a lot more no's than you are yeses. I thought, I'm going to beat those odds. Um, and the reality is, you do. You have to learn how to develop thicker skin probably than ever before and really not take things personally. Whether that's somebody not responding to an email or somebody saying, I'm going to make these introductions to you, and then it doesn't happen, right? Oftentimes, and certainly they may have said those, made empty promises. That could be the thing. But I think in many cases, people have so many things on their plates. And so they want to help you, but maybe that sounded like a great idea when you were on the side of a soccer field. And then on a Saturday afternoon, and by Monday morning, they have a pile of things like work has picked up, they have deliverables, right? And all of a sudden, this genuine offer that they made on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, is relegated to the bottom of their list. And that really isn't personal. So I think that's been something I've also had to get used to. Are those good examples, or do you want me to?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And it's the really, really good examples, and especially the not taking it personally,
Yeah,
you know. And
of course.
I love that the empathy you show and the understanding that it's really important to you. It's not so important to someone else because they have so many other urgent things.
But lessons, and I say this to my clients all the time, I think it's true. We learn lessons when things don't go well. When the person
Hmm.
does respond, right? And on Monday morning, there's an email in your box that says, or even Sunday night, right? Like they got on top of things early. And you think, gosh, this is great. This is gonna, one A is gonna lead to B to lead to C and D and whatever. That's great. But it's really when things don't go as planned that we learn. And let's face it, the past 2 years have been full of learning.
And one of those things is that you learned or you evolved from a primarily coaching model to a blended coaching, consulting, and advisory model.
Yes.
So, how did you know it was time to expand, and what did that shift require of you?
So one of the pieces of advice that I'd been given was, Rachel, don't let a perfect plan or the idea of a perfect plan um, constrain you. Because those who know me best know that I'm a perfectionist at heart. As a working mom, we learn how not to be a perfectionist or how to accept something less than perfect. But my I could easily get stuck working so hard on a plan that I don't actually do the work it's that I'm intending to do. And so I think some of the first few years of, and I'm still in it really, is putting something out there and seeing whether it sticks or not, and then trying to figure out how to adapt to it. And so when I launched my practice in February of 2024, I wanted to offer some blend of coaching and consulting. But people who knew me have know that I have at different times in my career. I started my career as a consultant, and at different points in time, I have worked as an independent consultant. And I didn't want this to be another version of one of those chapters where I worked on a business plan for a client or helped develop a new strategy. I really wanted the consulting work to be adjacent to coaching. And so there, I felt a need to really reposition myself, which was a risk, continues to be a risk, right? But to really reposition myself as the product of my leadership experiences, but when at this point choosing to focus on people and interpersonal dynamics and growth. And so um, I viewed it very much that the pendulum needed to swing out towards coaching before it could fall somewhere back into in a consulting model. And I also got pretty excited about coaching. It's work that I absolutely enjoy, that I find fulfilling. Um, and one of the things that I do when I start a coaching engagement, when I'm hired by through an employer, is that I conduct a 360 exercise. So I will speak with somewhere between 7 and 10 colleagues, some personal references. Uh, and when I say colleagues, that's peers, that's managers and executives, that's people who work on the client's team. And I try and develop a really good picture of how this person shows up and what some of those legacy relationships that might be acting as constraints, or some of where their growth, really where their growth edges are. And that becomes the heart of the the coaching engagement, excuse me. And in doing that, when I speak with a handful of people across the organization, and usually I am I'm coaching rather a leader. So I end up speaking with a number of people on the executive and the leadership team. And I get a pretty good sense of what is going on. And so then, as when I speak with the CEO or other executives, and certainly there's a confidentiality, so nothing I share is related to the client, right? But I get a sense for what is going on in the organization, and I can bring that to that leader's attention. So, in the throes of these 360 exercises, became clear to my client, not necessarily the person I was coaching, but the person who hired me, that there was more that I had to offer, and that doing some kind of coaching as well as consulting or advisory work was a way to really tap into more of what I bring to the table. And some clients said, "Thank you, this is really helpful. Keep coaching this employee." And then other people say, "Wait, could you help in these areas and these areas?" And oftentimes the answer was like, "Yes, I can help you do that. And I would like to help you." And in some cases, I would say I need to wait until I'm finished with this coaching engagement. And in other cases, some of the advisory projects that I was asked to help with were completely separate from my coaching client. And so, um, with a number of clients, I figured out ways to extend the relationship and to be able to bring an objective as well as an experienced light to the table, and open up the lines of communication and rethink ways of working among leadership teams.
I love it. So you're coaching by the mechanism that you use, the 360, helped you see where there are some problems or issues separate
Yeah.
from your coaching that then you could value add for the client.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I like to, I like, certainly I'm not a member of anyone's team, and I recognize that. But I really like, as an independent consultant, there are a lot of different roles that I can play. And I want my clients to know that I am really invested in them and their success. And so I want them to see me as an extension of their team. And so when we do working sessions, when I mediate or bring together people who are working out challenging relationships in some cases, um, I want to feel that I am invested in them. And so not to feel that I'm assumptive in any way, but I also don't want them to see me as so far removed that there's a veil between us. And I find that really connecting with my clients enables them to trust me and to trust the spaces that I create um, where they can be vulnerable and take risks that they wouldn't otherwise do. And that helps to really build long-standing relationships because, and in terms of like what are other learnings, I find that these are opportunities where I am very much building for long-standing relationships. That I don't view this as a transactional, I'm going to do this project and then I'm out. I may not work closely with someone for several months before, they may have a question again when they can call me back in. And so am I am interested in building long-standing relationships. And I think that becomes one of the filters that people notice about me. Um, And that helps people self-select whether they want to work with me or there's somebody who might be better tuned to them and their immediate needs.
Yeah, the 360 makes you pretty tuned to their needs, for sure.
So interesting, right?
Yeah. When we talked earlier, you talked about over what you called over investing in opening doors and playing the long game. And now you're starting to see those early conversations come to fruition.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
Well, I think you used the word dopamine, right? Earlier in the conversation. So when somebody comes back after I haven't spoken to them in over a year, let's say, and they say like, "Oh, I was thinking about you the other day." Um, the very human in me gets really excited because it means that at some point in time, we did connect. Like we did have a meaningful interaction. And to everything I've said earlier, they just didn't need to act on it in that moment. But when the moment arises, um, we all, it's human nature. We like to feel that we matter, that we said something of value, that we advanced a conversation, so on and so forth. And so I think when that point like comes around, it is somewhat exhilarating. And in the context of big wins, small wins, sometimes it's that reopening a door, which isn't revenue, right? It's just someone saying, I have some follow-up questions, right? But that's a small win because that door is reopening. And so we plant a lot of seeds as um, independent consultants, right? We plant a lot of seeds. I sometimes at the end of a week will feel like I'm just tired because I feel like I'm on all the time. And whether that is at a board meeting one evening, or that is um, in a client meeting, or whether it's, I don't want to trivialize it too much, but sometimes it's in the grocery store, right? Or at this proverbial soccer game. That there is a bit of always being on because you don't
Mhm.
know when somebody is going to ask a question or whether somebody's been reading some of my posts and they come up and they ask me about something I said and or wrote earlier that week or sometimes even a month ago. And you just want to make sure that at that moment, I'm not sitting there thinking about all the things that I have to do or all of the stresses of the day, and rather I can open that conversation and be ready to go.
Hmm.
Right? And witty and facile and responsive.
That's a big challenge. How do you manage that?
Well, something that I've never really been good at, but I am finding is more and more important is making sure I get enough sleep. Because we are all fresher, happier, and more agile when we've had proper sleep. So I think some of that is just being able to think clearly, and sleep is certainly one of those things. I think the other is just trying to stay centered and trying to really make sure like I'm living my values and I'm being true to myself. And so when I say I feel like I have to be on, that is being the best version of myself that isn't being someone who I'm not.
Mm, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to ask about where your practice is and a little bit about the future. Is your consulting practice delivering the lifestyle you dreamed of when you made the leap?
So I would answer that in a couple ways. One is we are all our own worst enemies, and my DNA is to work really hard. And so it would be very easy for me to be constantly working and not making time for anything else because I haven't reached all of the big goals that I have for myself, right? And then I have come to learn that first of all, I made this decision, I've taken a lot of risks, and I've given up a lot of things in order to have this practice in this lifestyle. And if I don't figure out what I need and live into that, then I'm then I'm not living I'm not I really am not achieving my goals, right?
Hmm.
So I try and keep that top of mind. And I'll give you an example. I have a number of clients I meet with in person, and I have a number of clients who are spread across the country. And some days I can be on Zoom all day long, and that doesn't feel great for me. So, what I have learned, and only because I've gone through periods where I haven't been able to achieve that balance, um, I have found that on days that where I'm end to end Zoom, I'd say 4 out of those 5 days a week, I know I need to either make a coffee date with a friend or go for a walk with a friend or a colleague. Do something every day that gets me out and with somebody in person. I may have shared with you that I play tennis rather competitively. And so tennis has become a really good outlet for that, where I can get a workout and be with people I really enjoy at the same time. So it serves a double use. And that is really my key for staying centered and for maintaining a certain balance. And that doesn't mean that I'm not working from 5:30 to 7:30 in the morning, or that I may not work at night or on the weekend or whatnot. Um, but that I do try and build in a little bit of time every day when I can, so that I'm not in my sitting here at my desk
Hmm.
from sunrise to sunset. So I do that. I also recognize that because I'm my own boss, I can and need to prioritize certain things. And so it's important to me to be at my kids' games, for example, after school, um, or school events that happen. It doesn't mean I will make it to everything, but I do try and make it to those things that really matter.
That's the beauty of having, I mean, that's for as hard as it is to be a self-employed consultant and coach, those are some of the benefits of being
Those
able
are the
to.
benefits. And if I'm not taking advantage of them, then I'm not, why am I doing this, right?
Exactly.
So,
You might as well have a job that's where you get a steady paycheck.
exactly. Exactly.
Where do you see your practice in 3 to 5 years?
Um, I would love to say that in 3 to 5 years, it is, I would hope there's a difference between 3 and 5, right? I would say in 3 years, I'm hoping that it's doubled in revenue, um, which doesn't always mean that I'm working twice as hard. It could mean that I'm have some collaborations that may expand my scope and my purview. And it could also bring in different types of work. So I always said that I wanted my practice to be some version of some combination of consulting and coaching and thought leadership. And so if you said, what is the biggest difference between, or how would I get to this, if I see these two revenue goals? I think it's a combination of a few things. One is I hope that this long game strategy continues to play out. And I have more organizations that I'm working with um, on an ongoing basis so that I have a more regular group of projects and initiatives that I'm working on at any given time. I also see an evolution of my coaching practice, which comes with just more years in the business. And on the thought leadership side, I would love to be doing some more speaking, more things like this that we're doing today, but some keynote speaking based on my experience as a coach, as as a leader, and as a researcher who interviews leaders and shares a lot of those themes. So I would love for that part of my work to also expand. Um,
Mhm.
so it's a combination of things. And one of the, it's funny, last year I had multiple clients who independently were all reading Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but he was the general manager. He was of 11 Mat he was the partner in the restaurant of 11 Madison Park, which was became the #1 restaurant in the world. And he was the head of the front of the house. And in an industry where great restaurants have historically been synonymous with excellence in the back of the house, in the kitchen, right? And one of the things he said in his book was as he defines excellence, he said it's not just doing one thing really well. It is about doing a set of different things and doing everything continually 10% better. And so when I think about this three-legged stool that I always envisioned when I started Rachel Wexler Leadership, I want, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years? I want to be a little bit better every year on each of those three dimensions.
Love it. And what do you think are the biggest challenges you're going to face in achieving your goals?
Well, I would say one is continuing to cultivate clients, new clients, and doing the work, right? That is part of, as you said, being the wait staff, the bottle washer, the everything. So I think one is how can I keep all of it going, and then figuring out what are those things that I would outsource or what who are those partners that I would like to bring on in order to help support a growing scope and at the same time be really mindful that of scope creep.
Mhm.
So I think that is going to figure out how can I maintain a this and to say balance, I don't think it's ever balanced, right? Because we figure out ways to get everything done. But I think it is also figuring out how to work smarter and smarter in order to handle more and more. So I think that that is going to be the biggest challenge and really finding I'm not worried that there isn't challenge. I think I enjoy each of these challenges, but I think the other challenge is going to be how to continue to keep things interesting without getting too excited about everything and not really staying true to to a specific anchor. And
Mhm.
so how can you be responsive to inquiries that come in without what while also staying pointed at the a consistent North Star.
Right. And that bright, shiny object going after things that maybe are not quite aligned,
Yeah.
but they would be good money, but they're not aligned. Yeah,
Yes.
that requires discipline.
Yes.
Yes.
And those are really, I think even naming them, you've seen me probably writing notes as we've been talking because even as I say these things, I'm thinking, I need to remember this and somehow, whether it's a sign on my desk or whether it's a list that I keep to make sure that I'm always going back to stay true to why what I'm creating, why I'm creating it, and how I'm creating it.
Yep. Well said. I have a couple as we start to near the end of the podcast. I have a couple rapid fire closing questions.
Okay.
First is what is one book, podcast, or resource that has been invaluable to your consulting practice?
Uh, personally, and even something that I share with my clients, I am a Brene Brown devotee.
Yes,
And
me too.
I love listening to her. I love seeing what I want to create in her. And I also love knowing that we all have we all have a softness inside of us and that's okay. And I think sometimes it's naming it. It's naming what we're afraid of. It's being vulnerable. It is um, talking about what we carry with us as a way of entering this world. And so I would say she probably was that person. If I could do anything, I'd say I want more of what she's doing.
Yeah. And what is your favorite Brene Brown book?
Mm, I think Dare to Lead. It's a hard question though.
Yeah, there there's some lots of good ones to choose from.
Another person who I really also enjoy is Priya Parker. Um, she wrote The Art of Gathering, and her book came out right before the pandemic, which was ill-timed. And she has a new book coming out in September. But one of the things that she does that I love is, we all know about an icebreaker um, to open up a room, and she has what she calls a magic question. And I love the idea of a magic question because, first of all, it sounds a little bit nicer than breaking ice. Um, but her thing is that her magic questions are ones that are democratic in nature. Everybody wants to answer and they want to hear what the other person is going to share, and that they also that someone has to take risk in answering that question. And so when you really pick that good question, not just about what are you proud of from last year or something work related, but when you can go into somebody's history and ask a question, like one of my favorites is, and this is one of my favorite, has always been one of my favorite questions to ask, but long before I knew it aligned with her magic question construct. Um, what was your favorite? What was your first job, and what did you learn from it? And sometimes you can unlock someone because it brings them back to a place before they were a leader of a multi-million slash billion dollar organization, or who they were before they went to college and learned, entered a new world that they maybe weren't part of before. And so you really understand what how someone entered the world and how they incorporated those learnings early on into what they did. And so I would say Priya Parker has also really, her work is so interesting. And it's not in some cases, it can be about putting together a wonderful dinner party. In many cases, it's also about how do you bring people into a space and get them to interact and contribute and to build something together that that has never been created before.
Love it. And the last question, and the most important question, how can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more about you and your work?
I always love when people want to connect with me. I do post regularly on LinkedIn. Um, and I have found that that's I love the conversations that are started. And I often will share things that I have found in conversations that I have with clients. I certainly never divulge who they are, where they come into being, but um, in so much of my work that I do, people are often surprised to know that there are other people like them who are facing the same types of challenges or are held back by the internal or external um, hurdles, and that's a real way of helping people to feel human. And to do that in a way, it's not just about, oh, well, you don't feel good about that. I don't feel good about it either. It's really in service of a goal or a result or something like that. So on LinkedIn, I also share some of the material on Instagram. On LinkedIn, it's Rachel Levy Wexler. On um, Instagram, it's R Wexler Leadership. And then I also have a website, and I have been doing, when I started this work, I was also doing some research on women leaders. And the project is called JEWEL, which is an acronym for Joining and Empowering Women in the Exploration of Lived Experience. And so some of that material I share in my social media posting. Some I've also shared in my blog on my website, which is rachel-wexler.com. And I've started recently an interview series, probably not quite as large as your podcast, AJ, but called Full Picture Leadership. It is just getting underway, but I am talking with leaders about a moment in their experience where they, probably a high stakes moment, where they thought they had all the information they needed and they realized that they didn't see they hadn't seen the full picture. And so that is some material that I will use and put on my blog or on LinkedIn or things like that. So there are plenty of ways to reach me, and I love when people come with questions and really interesting situations to help think through.
Wonderful. And for those of you listening and or watching, all of the links will be in the show notes on the ajriedel.com website. And Rachel, thank you. We are at the end of our podcast time for today. Thank you so much for being my guest. And for those of you listening and watching, until next time, keep thriving through.
Thanks, AJ.
That was Rachel Wexler. And I want to leave you with something she said that I think is worth sitting with. She talked about what she called planting seeds, all those conversations, introductions, and follow ups that didn't immediately turn into revenue. And her point was that's not wasted effort. That is the strategy. The consultants who give up on the relationship building because it doesn't pay off fast enough are the ones who never get to experience what happens when those seeds finally bloom. If you're in one of those slow seasons right now, I want you to hear that. You are not doing it wrong. You may just be earlier in the timeline than you want to be. If this episode was helpful, share it with another self-employed consultant who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss a conversation. You can connect with Rachel on LinkedIn and find her work at rachel-wexler.com. All of the links are in the show notes at ajriedel.com. Until next time, keep thriving through.